Welcome to another episode of the Journeys of Not So Ordinary People podcast. I'm one of your co-hosts, Dr. Dave Peltz, and joining me with my partner in crime, or not crime really, but is Dr. Joe Hamlett. How are you doing today there, Dr. Joe?
I'm doing good, Dr. Dave. How you doing, man?
Most excellent, sir, most excellent. Today's fun and exciting topic for us to embrace is technology. always a
Technology.
it's always a fun one to delve into. So
Right.
Dr. Joe, in our usual customary manner, one of us brings up a topic and then conveniently tosses the ball to the other person and says, have some fun for a little bit. So what are your thoughts on technology?
Wow, technology. That's broad, really wide open, just because of the fact that there are so many advances in technology that it's very, very hard to keep up. I mean, from us doing a podcast right now on this platform, there's software to do this. There's gear that you purchase, microphones, cameras, things like that. So technology is an ever changing environment. So it's just as much as we've talked about this in the past too, just staying relevant,
Mm,
right? So we've talked about maybe continuing to educate yourself and being a continuous learner to make sure you can stay up to speed as much as you can on the personal and professional development side. But then that other leg of that is the technological side. How do you stay relevant as far as all the things that are changing in software and hardware, not just personally, but within your organizations?
mhm,
Just
mhm.
I think about years ago, and I'm dating myself. I'm not gonna, tell the exact year, but I remember when we first started using computers, uh, you know, adding our intranets and portal pages and things like that. And now, organizations can't survive without those types of
Mhm,
things. It's just funny that, we've become so dependent on those tools to
mhm.
make our lives better. It's even gone to the fact or point where we've taken away jobs just
Mm,
because of all those
yeah.
advances. If you go to the local WalMarts and some of the other stores, they don't have cashiers anymore. I mean, it's now you're doing self checkout. So, as much as we'd like to say that things are similar to what they were. I mean, just again, things have changed so much in just a small amount of time. So
Yeah.
when you think about technology in reference to your organization, like I said, I remember when spreadsheets and just Word documents were the tools that you used in your everyday work and in your schedule.
Mhm,
Now it's turned into multiple softwares that can communicate back and forth. They can pull information and data from other spread type of sheets and
mhm.
databases and things like that. So it's you almost had to have a light um, computer information degree to can maneuver some of these things. But
Yeah.
that's what I think of when I think of technology, just all the advances, just all of the things that we've watched, in front of us that change so rapidly. I mean, to the one that's the most common technological advancement is your phone. Remember,
Mhm.
we went from phones that, could hold a charge for 30 minutes and you're dead. Now they're,
Mhm.
going for 2 days and you can do
Yeah.
everything on your phone. So,
Yeah.
that's one of the probably the best examples of where we've gone in technology. But I know I've just rambled a little bit, so I'll hand it back over to you, Dr. Dave.
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Joe. You mentioned a lot of really great stuff, and some of it we've touched upon in the past, here and there, sprinkled throughout some of our conversations. But this time we wanted to dedicate this particular episode to technology because there is so much going on right now. Um, and I'm not going to mention any of the current exact items that are out there, but there is definitely a personal and professional perspective to technology. And like you mentioned on the personal side, well, we'll start out with the phone, like you just mentioned, it
Right.
used to be you just pick it up. I mean, like 100 years ago, you just pick it up and there'd be like 20 people on the line, and you have to say, I want
Oh
Mrs.
yeah,
Smith
right.
down the street.
Yep.
And then we got individual phone numbers and with those nice little rotary dials, which a lot of the younger generations don't really quite understand. Then it went to touch tone, because why not give a whole history on the telephone, right?
Right.
And then we came up with our cell phones, which were pretty cool, the big old bricks. And then
Yep.
they got smaller and smaller and smaller. I think the smallest one I had was probably about maybe that big. It's not very
Yep.
big, a couple inches, 2 by 3 inches. It wasn't much bigger than a business card. And that was actually one of my favorites. You couldn't do much with it. You could text and call, voice messages, but just the convenience of it.
Right.
And now
Right.
we have these awesome products right here, with like you said, that can do everything, from in the early 70s and late 70s, when these sci-fi shows were coming up, and they're, doing all these cool things with these little devices. Well, now we have those cool devices.
Right.
But with that is a learning curve, because that, earlier on it was years between these improvements, and now it's months, and there's just a delay in the release of these items,
Right.
and by the
Yep.
time they're released, they're already obsolete, because they've already had the next latest and greatest waiting in line to be pumped out into the market.
Right.
So to your point on needing to have that awareness or a light education in technology, sometimes it can be challenging, for sure. Especially now we can talk about gaming consoles and the hardwares and softwares. And one of the things that most people take for granted, aside from their phone, is their television and viewing preferences. It used to be
Right.
just
Yep.
normal TV with an
Right.
antenna, and you'd stand there with aluminum foil and point
Yep.
your arms in the air, and look like a robot, I guess you could say. Sometimes it's fun to wrap people up in aluminum foil anyways, but and then we went to cable and then satellite, and now we have the streaming stuff, and it's just, hard media and soft media. It's just amazing where we've come with technology.
Right.
But the other side of that is, you got to stay on top of this stuff. I mean, I'm pretty good with a lot of the office type package software, but when you're out of the loop for a year or two or five, you have to go back and relearn some of those things, because things have changed within just a few years or one or two versions. There's can be some rather significant changes within that software. So you might have been an expert with it 5 years ago, and then you jump back into that environment, whether it's retail or manufacturing or customer service or recruiting or what have you, engineering or mathematics and the sciences, and it's completely different. The name is the same, but the user interface is different. There's more bells and whistles. What used to be, might take you 5 steps now is one click,
Right. Yep.
so if you don't stay on top of these things, sometimes it can be a detriment to your career. So
Right.
we've mentioned before staying current and relevant within your job. And, part of that is the software and the hardware. And, I was thinking back, we've had this conversation a few times over the last couple of months. It's like, oh, let me pull out my old laptop and let me get the truck to lift it up off the floor first, because it's like 20 pounds, and it's,
Right.
and you could, it's like the size of 4 shoe boxes. But things have changed. I mean,
Right.
the size of laptops and computers, and now we have tablets. And this might sound a little weird or wonky to some of our viewers, like, yeah, get on with it, get on with it. We understand the growth and technology of things, but there is a reason that we're pointing this out, and that is, when it comes to technology, it doesn't stand still. And for those
Right.
individuals, and it happens to us as well sometimes, we get a little bit fearful of change or hesitant towards change, too much change too quickly, or things are working great, why do we need to upgrade? Or maybe if it's not broke, don't fix it, or if it's not that broken, don't fix it. And the
Right.
reason is, it's change, it's technology, it's not going to stop. And as we've mentioned before, change is all around us, it's all the time. We change our clothes, hopefully, you know every couple of days or weeks. So that's change. We turn on the light switches and off. That's a change in our environmental status. So there's change all around us. And technology is a big piece of that. It used to be flipping a switch manually. Now you can literally walk into a room, the lights go on, you walk out, the lights go off. There's voice commands, you can change the colors, the intensity of the lighting. It's absolutely phenomenal what technology has done, but there's a lot of learning that goes into it.
Right. You talk about, things change, and they do. They're constantly changing as far as technology. But kind of back to our point, maybe a few episodes ago about those transferable skills, those
Yeah,
things that you can
yeah.
continue to pile on top of one another, and
Mhm.
that's really what happened to me, years ago. Like I mentioned, portal pages,
Yeah.
intranets, and things like that. And so back, way back in the early 2000s, that was one of the things that I started to learn was, creating portal pages and
Mhm.
designing pages and things like that. And what's ironic is, nearly 20 years later, or right at around 20 years later, I was asked to do that again in my new
Mhm.
organization. So, things have changed slightly, but the kind of the basics of it
Yeah, the
were very
basics are pretty,
similar.
yeah.
And so, over the years, I've kind of dabbled with those types of things. So, to kind of to your point, I was staying relevant. I was continuing to practice those things so that I didn't totally just, come up against that thing again and be like, wow, I don't remember any of this. So for me,
Mhm.
it was a really easy transition to kind of recall some of that stuff that I knew already. And I still had to learn some more stuff, but the idea that I had, kind of an idea of what that
Mhm.
looked like. So I think as, you say things change, but sometimes as much as things
Yeah.
change,
They
they
don't.
stay the same
Yeah.
to a degree.
Yeah,
So
to a
that
degree.
like we just mentioned and we've mentioned in the past, though once you learn something, you walk away and you don't totally forget it,
Yeah.
unless that's your intent is to
Yeah.
purposefully disregard whatever that was. But for the most part, you can just continue to build on those existing skills and those things that
Mhm.
you do have in your toolbox, to just expand upon it. And then that's even what we kind of refer to when we talk about, say, an individual that's been working the same job or very similar job in the past 20 years,
Mhm.
and they've been mainly doing the same thing, but the idea is, you continue to incorporate new things, and
Mhm.
you're just going to continue to enhance those
Those
things that you
incremental changes.
right. You're
Yeah.
going to continue to enhance what you already know, and you're just going to be that much better at it. So, that's why we always encourage to continue that learning and that
Mhm.
growth, continuous learning.
Yeah.
It's inevitable that things are going to change. So it's in your best interest to continue to try and change along with it. And you don't have to, like Dave said, you don't have to jump on the first, the next new thing,
Mhm.
but still, kind of get an awareness. And I think you said that too,
Yeah.
gain some type of awareness of what that change is, how it's going to impact you and how it's going to affect you. And I
Mhm.
think the more you remain open to that, the better off you'll be. It won't
Yeah.
just be dropped in your lap and somebody says, hey, learn this or do this. Because
Mhm.
if you've kind of stayed, you know, consistent with learning and at least becoming familiar with it, because you're not going to be a master of all these things, but at least you can, you'll gain some familiarity with it, that you won't be totally lost. And I think
Yeah.
that's
And you
really
brought up a good
important.
point there. And I like that point because just because it's new doesn't mean you have to go out and immediately upgrade. And we've seen
Right.
several cases where in the last handful of years where a product comes out and it's got all this hype, and then people go out and buy it, and then they find out that there's these, devastating flaws with or critical flaws with it. And then
Right.
a few months later, they come out with the revised or updated version that's
Right. Yeah.
fixed. And
The
now
patch.
yeah, the patch or whatever, or the new
Yeah.
device, because
Yeah.
I don't know, things like batteries catching on fire, who knows? And so, with when we think about that, when we talk about staying current and relevant and keeping up on your skill set with technology, it doesn't mean you have to jump in and buy everything as it comes out. But we are saying, to Joe's point, you have to at least have that understanding of what's going on, because certain things change a little bit at a time. So you don't necessarily need the latest and greatest. A lot of companies that issue laptops and computers switch them out every 3 years because there's enough of a change in 3 years,
Right.
even
Yep.
though the products are coming out every few months. So, we need to be cognizant of that and be aware, is now the right time to jump in? And there are some people that'll jump in every time at the first,
Right.
and that's needed in society. There's a need for that. But then there's others that take a little bit more cautious approach. And
Right.
when we think about, let's shift gears a little bit and go to the professional development side, which you had mentioned a few minutes ago, and that is, as leadership or as company owners, when do you um, start cycling in and cycling out software and applications and hardware and updating your security requirements and that sort of thing? When is a good time? And there's really no set answer. I mean, it just depends. At least that's
Right.
what this researcher says, and a lot of researchers tend to say is, well, it just depends. How big is your company? How quickly are you moving? What do you need? What do you don't need? So there's a lot
Well,
of considerations there.
well, and I was kind of going to go down that path. You're kind of doing that already, but it goes back to that all important step of that reflection.
Mm,
Where you are today and
yeah.
where would you like to be? Because, like you said, some larger organizations may say, you know what, we see the new technology, we see the new updates, but we're not going to do that just yet. We're going to
Mhm.
wait. Like you said, maybe they'll work the bugs out, or maybe this will be more in alignment with what we're doing or what we plan to do in the future. So again, it comes down to that reflection, that
Mhm.
critical self reflection or critical groups reflection,
Yeah.
whatever the organization is.
Yeah.
But just understanding, if they choose not to make the upgrade or the changes, what impact is that going to have on our
Yeah.
organization down the road? Or if we
Mhm.
choose to jump in right now, are we still going to be working through maybe some of the issues that have not been identified? So sometimes
Mhm.
it's best to wait, like you say, instead of changing out, like you said, we don't change out computers or laptops at our organizations for a couple of years because some of the changes are really small changes that
Mhm.
won't have that big impact. So you may wait for that big drop,
Mhm.
instead of like with our phones, the new phone comes out every year.
Mhm.
Has it changed enough for me to upgrade to that new phone?
Right.
In most cases, depending on your situation, it doesn't warrant that additional money. So that's the
Right.
other thing you have to consider, because even in your own personal and professional development, there's some new leadership training out there. Workshops are going on today. In a year, someone else, or 6 months, somebody, another group may say, "Hey, this is the new thing. This is
Mhm.
where everybody's going." So, do you
Yeah. We
again
need to be
opt
careful
in?
of like that flavor of the week or flavor of the month type
Absolutely.
thing.
That
And
that's
those
a good
types of temporary trends.
right. Yep.
And
Yep.
and we've been discussing this for quite a long time. We look at the economy of the job market. There are a lot of crazy trends that have been going on since the pandemic. Some of them are good
Right.
and some of them are not so good. So, and this is in the technology realm. And so, when we look at it from a company perspective, do we go all in or do we need to wait? Because if we go all in, is it really going to get us the results? And sometimes it's hard to forecast that because, well, we won't know until we do it, but we can kind of
Right.
approximate. We would encourage you really think that over. Is this the right time to make that investment and make that change? You're going to change a software package. Have you done a beta launch? Have you tested it
Right.
out?
Yep.
Have you mirrored it to see how it's going to play, a little sandbox, if you will, before you actually make it go live and it breaks everything in your company or half of it?
Right.
So those are some things we need to think about. The other thing, when we talk about technology, and unfortunately I've seen this happen several times, is that from a company perspective, companies will buy a very minimalistic package of software or an application and state that they will build the rest of what they need in-house
Right.
instead of paying the full price because it will quote unquote be less expensive. And in all actuality, and from my experience, that has been the furthest from the truth. I mean, there's proprietary software, there's proprietary aspects to that software and that hardware. And that's why it's called proprietary, is because they have it working a certain way, and without it, it typically doesn't
Right,
work or work
right,
as well. And what companies wind up doing is spending, twice, three, four, five, 10 times as much as they would have if they would have just bought what they needed.
right,
That
right.
cost is factoring in time, money, and personnel, because all that factors in, because if they're working on that, what are they not working on? If you're spending on that, what are you not spending on that needs to be, that may have a higher priority?
Right, because just to your point, as they're spending all that time and money and effort on trying to make that whatever that minimalized product they purchased, to meet their needs, and then they
Mm-hmm.
have to do a lot of, you know, integrating and hodgepodging
R&D and
and
reverse
yeah,
engineering and
yeah, and just and does it actually work at the end? Instead of it being that smooth application where you, like you said before, it's got one step, you push a button and it does five or six things,
mm-hmm.
versus you try and put it together, piece it together with your own input.
Mm-hmm.
And now there's six steps instead of that one,
Yeah.
magical step that would have happened if you'd have
Or you
bought
get
the
that
entire
one step to
package.
work just right and it breaks three
And
other things, and
exactly,
it's just a
that
never ending cycle.
absolutely, you're right. I've been part of organization that's done that too. They try and save $1, but like you said, all the effort going
Yeah.
into making it work might have been better off to purchase that
Yeah.
full package
Mm-hmm.
deal. So yeah, there's two trains of thought on that, but like you said, I've experienced it, where you see the whole package, where they drop the
Mm-hmm.
whole thing in your lap, you're good to go. Downside to that is just that you have to totally rely on them for support and for maintenance and things
Yeah.
like that. And I know that's one sore spot for organizations, to having to reach outside of their
Yeah.
organizations to get it managed or maintained, versus if they do parts and pieces of it.
Mm-hmm.
But then you still run into the issues of, okay, we did this part, so now we need to go back to them because we've changed something. Like you said, we broke something, now they don't interact, or this one
Yeah.
doesn't work properly. So there's so many things that need to be considered.
Yeah.
But when you're thinking about how to apply this new technology or this new thing to our existing, or what it looks like. And that's, I'll go back to the evaluation or reflection piece. How do I want this to work? How's it working today?
Yeah.
What are my expectations for tomorrow? What do I want it to look like?
Yeah, and then there's another piece of that. One piece of it is the reflection and taking that moment to pause. The other one is, when you're in a critical situation, sometimes you just have to rip that proverbial band-aid off
Yeah,
and
that's
just
true.
take that action. There was an entity I worked at one point, and they had three pieces of equipment. One was functioning, one was functioning at 50%, and one was not functioning.
Mm,
And it was forcing them to fall behind schedule, which was costing them dollars on the backside, because now they're having to pay penalties. And when they asked me, just out of my lay curiosity, Dave, what do you think? I said, I think you should get the new equipment. Well, that's going to cost this much. How much are you losing every month right
right,
now? And it was twice that, but they didn't want to, air quote, spend the money that they could easily afford to replace that piece of equipment. And it's like, why are you not doing that?
right,
It
right,
makes absolutely no sense, because that new piece of equipment would have actually doubled the entire production of all three if they were working at 100%. And
right.
it was just, to me, it was a no-brainer. So, and there's other reasons behind that. The other thing that I wanted to bring up from a professional perspective is, when you're in a line staff or management position and these new ideas or these new pieces of software or equipment involving technology come up, is the need to, I'm going to say, tactfully push back sometimes. And that can
Mm,
be very challenging, because, sometimes you're not in a direct position to say, hey, we need to maybe rethink this or pause on this. Maybe you're not that highly regarded subject matter expert, or maybe you are. And this is the opportunity where we as a collective team within that company need to provide emphasis to pause sometimes, because leadership and sometimes even management have these great ideas and great solutions, but they don't necessarily get they don't get the needed feedback from the line staff, the
Right.
people that are going to be actually operating this equipment. They think that they can, they being leadership management, oh, we're going to get this new piece of equipment or software, we're going to put it in place and everything's going to be fine.
Yep.
But there's a learning curve. And
Right.
if your workforce has not been properly trained prior to it being implemented and had time to practice on that equipment to fully understand the nuances, it can be a huge setback. It might be the best investment the company could make at that time. But from a training and integration perspective, if the due diligence and the time hasn't taken place and been implemented properly, it can be a detriment.
Dave, you just explained an exact scenario that happened to me years ago. With almost you must have read my mind on that, because that twinsies thing
Yeah, that
flaring
was
up. But yeah,
my forehead's getting hot.
but to your point, that is exactly what we witnessed with this project that I was part of years and years ago.
Mm,
So we had two sites at two separate locations, across the country, right? We started this project we were teaming up on this project, with this separation.
mhm,
We did exactly what you talked about. We integrated the right people, the subject matter experts, the operators, the trainers. We got everybody involved and kept them involved the entire time, right? And so when we started our new piece of equipment, it went flawless. I mean,
mhm,
we were
mhm.
able to recognize problems. We were able to get parts in our supply chain. We were able to schedule maintenance. We were able to do all those things. And so our um, up to that point, our availability for our equipment was in the lower 60s.
Mm,
And with the implementation of this new project, this new equipment, we were often running in the upper 90s as
wow.
far as efficiency on this machine.
Yeah.
Then you go to our counterparts. So, like I said, we all went through the same training. We all went through the exact same thing. We were at all the same meetings, everything. But the difference was, their approach was not, you know, find the subject matter experts, find the people that were going to be operating, include them in this process, include them in the training, the learning, everything. They didn't go that route.
Mm,
So when we started up, we were off and running, no
yeah.
looking back. Our sister, organization, they struggled from the beginning, and we actually had to take some of our resources, send to them for periods over time, like weeks and months, to
Mm,
help them go back and do the things we did initially.
mm,
And it took them months and months to even get it to where it was, and they never matched our
yeah.
output or our performance. But that's just an example, kind of to your point. Part of our team, we did it the right way. We incorporated everybody that should be involved in the process and project, whereas the other team used their same old methodology that
Yeah.
hadn't worked in the past or shown good results in the past, and they struggled. And we just thrived. We just blew them out of the water in competition. We
Yeah.
even had the manufacturer of that equipment come back and say, you're running this better than anyone else in the industry. That's how
Mm,
good we had done it. But we had done all that legwork. We had done, and it was definitely growing pains,
yeah. Yeah.
because the
Sure.
approach that our part of the organization wanted to take was very similar to the other organization, and we would have been in the same boat. But that was part of it. We learned from those mistakes by looking at past projects and looking at past experiences and
Hmm.
saying, hey, we've got to change this up. We have to do
Yeah.
something different, because again, we're going to end up down the same path of not having this equipment come up and running like it should. So
Mhm.
yeah, that's a very good point and observation that you had, that making sure the right people are in the room to maybe push back, like you said, to push
Right. Right.
back and say, hey, we've got examples. And I think that's most important too, is showing those examples of past experiences, those things that didn't pan out, or the
Yeah.
things that showed success, and
Yeah.
just showing that roadmap of where you were in the past, how you got there, and then whether it was successful or not, and being honest with that. But you're right, being in a position to throw that caution out there so that people are aware of it. And in this case, our manager was willing to
Right.
listen and to hear those people that had those experiences and those concerns. So that was a huge part of it, that our leader was willing to accept that responsibility, that okay, I'm going to listen to my people, to my experts in this category. So and again, the results were just night and day difference. It
Right.
was amazing. And then to be able to have to go assist that other part of the organization because they did not choose that route. So that was one of my best experiences of working from beginning of a project, and then seeing the end results was
Yeah.
just a very good experience for me.
Yeah, and that's great to hear, Joe, because not every story has to be doom and gloom and about
Right,
critical failures and mistakes. Some of these stories that we share are about, huge successes. The point of these stories is to learn and hopefully glean some sort of something insight from what we're saying that can be taken back to your personal or professional environments.
right.
So with that, it looks like we're almost on time. So what are your any closing thoughts? What final thoughts do you have there, Dr. Joe?
Like we both said it throughout this episode, it's just the fact that things are changing rapidly,
Yeah.
and always you should expect that they will always continue to change. We've just had so many examples in the past few years that are evident that things
Mhm.
are going to change and continue to change. But also today's point, though, it's still, you should reflect, take a step back and make sure whether it's new software, new hardware, new flavor of the month, whatever
Mhm.
program, whatever it is, make sure it still aligns with where you want to go,
Yeah.
and not to say be hesitant and reject all the new things that are coming down the pike, but to very seriously look at, okay, will this be will this help me, will this
Right.
assist me get to where I want to go, and but at the same time also have to keep that open mind of, yeah, it's working great now, but can I still see this as a positive? Can I still gain
Yeah.
something from this? So not to totally just reject everything that comes down, and as constant as it is, but really to take a look at it, whether it's going to align or fit. So
Right.
just that we said it probably on every episode, is that reflection, just really taking the time to see how it will impact you.
Yeah. Very well stated there, Mr. Dr. Joe, Mr. Dr. Joe, Dr. Joe. I don't know where I was going with that one. But yeah, that's a good way to wrap it up. Just really do your due diligence with technology and stay on top of it as much as necessary. Don't let that topic kind of slide to the wayside, because you might be missing an opportunity there. So with that, we would like to thank our viewers and listeners for tuning into another episode of the Journeys of Not So Ordinary People podcast. If you enjoyed this episode or any of our other episodes, for which we have a virtual plethora, please give us a like, share us with your staff, with your peers, colleagues. The more that it gets out there, the more folks we can help and assist. So with that, we're going to depart with our usual phrase of keep on being your not so ordinary you.